Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming to another wonderful episode of Ministering Over Fostering. And we are in season 2 of this podcast. We are very, very excited today because we have another wonderful special guest that we've been dying to meet and for you to meet. And so here she is today. So, Dali, can you jump in and tell us a little bit about yourself, your career, what you do, because people need to know why you're here.
Yeah, definitely. So I am from Nicaragua, came to the US at the age of 7, joined the military. I thought it was going to be 3 years, but it turned out to be 10 amazing years. And I dealt with a lot of adversity, and I ended up becoming an advocate for not just myself, but for other people. So about 6 years ago, I incorporated DaliTalks LLC with the intention of providing bullying awareness and prevention education to parents as well as kids, but mainly the parents, because the parents are the ones who go and bat for kids, and sometimes they need to be informed. And I'm living in Maryland right now. It's cold already. So, and I have 2 kids, they're teens, and my husband is also a veteran. So yeah, that's a little bit about me.
It's amazing. You have so much experience.
Yeah, and I'd even know about the military aspect. That's amazing.
Yeah, I'm very proud of that because it was 10 long, hard years, but that was like the best decision that I could have made for myself.
Yeah. Well, on behalf of
Mhm.
SNL, we want to say thank you to you and your husband for your service. We truly believe that it's because of all of you who have sacrificed some of your time. We have this freedom. So thank you so much. But one of the reasons why you're here today is a very important topic that we think needs to be brought to light. And you say you're from Nicaragua. And so we know, particularly for me, I can speak for the Hispanic Latino culture. My husband is Salvadorian, I'm Mexican. And that is something that can be not very talked about in our cultures. And so I think it's important to really dive in and talk about this. So, what can you tell us about bullying as an expert in that field? What do you know about it? What can you share with us?
Yeah, that's such a good question. Overall, it's something that is so pervasive that people just accept it, although they know it's extremely detrimental to our mental health to just know how to manage it. And it can literally destroy lives, and it has taken the lives of so many children. I have Google alerts to stay up to date with what's going on with bullying, not just here in the United States, but throughout the world. And the stories that I see just break my heart. One recent one there in Moreno Valley Unified School District settled for $27 million to the guardians of a young boy. He was 13. And, it started off with just kids thinking it was funny to pick on a kid that looked like a loner, as they said. And one of the things I tell people is you just don't know what people are going through, why they look shy or why they're quiet. Sometimes they just might be the observer that doesn't want to just open up to everybody because, they've been burned before, or just because they've seen their parents get burned before. And so they're very guarded. And they also have like high expectations of themselves and high standards of themselves. So just because somebody looks standoffish or like they don't want to engage, or maybe they look shy or weak to you, that's just your perception of that person, but you don't really know what's going on. So with this young man, he had that appearance of, he was a little skinny and didn't look like the tough guy. And he got picked on, is what they call it, really was bullying. And then he was assaulted, which is another form of bullying. And he got kicked and punched, and he fell, hit his head. And as he was on the floor, they kept hurting him. And a few days later, he died from the head injuries. Now, I tell this story because I was living in Moreno Valley at the time, and I was already doing this work. And my kids don't go to that school district, but I remember calling the middle school where he was going. And I offered my help, and they were so dismissive. And I want parents to know this, that despite the fact that something that big happened, there are schools that will still not prioritize the safety of your children and students. This is something I wish I could have, like big, huge billboards that would encourage or have messages of encouragement to speak up about what you don't like about your school. I don't understand the culture, the society that we're in, where everything is about, well, we can't do anything about it, when really you can. The solution is actually so much easier or simpler than one thinks. But because everybody falls into complacency, they just become part of the problem, whether you want to or not, whether you want to accept it or not. So with this situation with this kid who died, the two boys that beat him up and took his life, their lives have been shattered too, and their parents and their family members. There are friends of those kids, all of them, the victims and the bullies, whose life has changed because of this one event. And you cannot take that back, right? You can't just say, oh, I'm sorry. I hit your son and he hit himself on the head. And, and the thing is, going back to, you just don't know who people are or why they are the way that they are. This child who got bullied and died, he had lost his parents a few years back. He was in the care of his aunt and uncle. So, one of the misconceptions is, oh, people grieve for a year or so and then they're done. No, you grieve forever. From what I've seen, speaking to people, you just grieve for a long time. You just learn to manage it. So my first thought when I heard of this baby, dying, I thought, how horrible to have to experience something that is seen as acceptable. That this child is already going through so much, and it doesn't show. We don't have to carry our pain on our sleeves. We don't have to. We shouldn't have to do it for you to feel comfortable enough to leave me alone, to go for a different target. We shouldn't have to. And these are the type of conversations that I believe parents need to have, but not just once or twice, but often. Because we're seeing so many boundaries being crossed that maybe you and I growing up would never dare. There's a level of loss of values and morals, and it's scary. There are some kids that have really high ones, and I'm grateful to the parents that are teaching that. But we have this society now with technology, and the media is so good with entertaining us with things that we think, oh, I would never do that. But we laugh about it and we condone it by watching it. And people, when I say stuff like this, people are like, oh, you're just being a negative Nelly. Like, don't kill it for me. I like that show, or I like that song. But yeah, but when kids are literally believing that life is a certain way or that it is acceptable to do certain things, and it's hurting themselves and others, we really need to stop and think.
I think I see Lakeisha's face and I see mine, and I think it's just hard not to feel the weight of everything that you're saying, because it's very, very real what's happening out there, and these kids are susceptible to that. There's no exception to who this can happen to, and there are so many things that make us different. There's so many insecurities already that we come through going into school and high school. I remember wanting high school to be over, and then when it's over, you think back and you're like, some of those things were so trivial that we were suffering because of, for us, it was economic status. My dad was a single father of 4. We didn't have the name brand shoes. We had to make ends meet, and that sets you apart. And sometimes it's something very small that can set you apart. And then the moment people find that out, that kind of opens up this avenue for that. So I want to say thank you for bringing this information and not shying away from the truth of what's happening out there, because I do think people need to know that. And that's what this platform is. We don't shy away from that. We're very transparent. But I know Lakeisha wanted to share something, so I'll go ahead and give it to you, Lakeisha.
Yeah, thank you for, like Myra said, bringing this up, and the fact that some of these schools are also not participating in wanting to change this subject. And I was actually talking to Myra about this last week. I, in 5th grade, had a similar experience of being bullied, and me and my family left. It was a school in Inland Empire. I'll keep this name of the school confidential because I'm hoping they changed, but moved to a different house, which led me to attending a new school. And so what I've noticed is the higher grade there is, it seems like kids are not as welcoming anymore. So I went into a brand new school, didn't know anybody, very hard making friends. I sat by myself at lunch, and there was one particular girl that was very popular at this school. And I just so happened to have the same class as her. And so I just remember at one point, this young lady had everybody in the class sit on one side while I was the only child on the opposite side. And we had a substitute that time. And this young lady was blurting out inappropriate words at me and had all the kids laughing. And I just remember at that time period in my life going to sleep and just having anxiety, like major anxiety about going to school the next day. I cried. I begged my mom not to send me. And my mom was super supportive. She was in that principal's office all the time, but nothing was changed. And I think back to that situation because the fact that, what is there, like 30 kids to a class back then, maybe more now.
Yeah.
The fact that a substitute can sit there and see a child being bullied and not intervene, that scares me now as a parent, because I think of a lot of these kids that we, see that are put into resource homes, that have a connection with the foster care system, and they're being moved from school to school to school, constantly having to make new friends, put in new situations. A lot of times as resource parents, we feel like it's an easier route just to have them attend the school that's closer to our house versus, let's try to allow them to go to the school where they were just moved from, where they might have a life, they might have friendships, instead of being uprooted and having to make all these connections all over again. So I can't even imagine the trauma that a lot of, our kids that are in the foster care system go through, and often don't have a voice, don't have people support them in these situations. And a lot of them are carrying this burden with them. So I can see how some of these suicide rates are higher, right? How some of the self-harm rates are a lot higher because these kids are suppressing it. It can either get to the situation as this poor young boy that lost his life, and I can't even think about his family, what they're going through. So just thank you for bringing this to light, because I do think that it should be well known. Like, these teachers, principals, these staff members of these schools, they have to jump in and protect our kids, because when we're sending them to these schools, we're saying, I trust you with my kid, right? And that's not trust if our kids are being hurt, let alone losing their lives.
Yeah, and as a matter of fact, on that note, I'm constantly doing research on this topic, and time and time again, the topic of why parents are removing children from traditional schooling always comes down to, number one is the low quality of education, but number two is always school violence, which includes bullying. And before the pandemic, there was 160,000 kids in the United States every single day who would miss school only because they were trying to avoid a bully. And so when people think, 160,000 kids every day, that's a lot of kids. But let's think about how that impacts that child's academics and their self-esteem. I was bullied pretty heavily when I arrived from Nicaragua. I didn't speak English at all. I didn't know about the culture. I didn't know about the pervasive racism that happens and the name calling because I'm a brown skinned girl, and then so-and-so is black, and so-and-so, So it was horrible. And I never told anyone because, number one, back then the word bullying didn't really exist. And number two, it's just kids being kids, which is the mentality that today it still exists. And that's why, bullying continues. But let's talk about the financial aspect of bullying and how it hurts your pocket as a parent as well as the schools. When schools have kids that miss a day in class, they're losing money. Last time I did research, per child, the school gets about $120 per day per child. So you do the math, that's millions of dollars out of the school system. And we're already hurting, right? Our schools need updates on the classrooms, you need more teachers, you need all kinds of stuff. But you especially need education for the teachers to prevent things like what happened to you, which was horrible, where this teacher did nothing, absolutely nothing. And one of the reasons that happens is because teachers don't know how to identify different types of bullying. Most people think bullying is a punch in the face, you have a bruise, and just because you get hit, it doesn't really mean that you got bullied. You have to have like scars and blood and, like, it's ridiculous. Who made up these rules? But everybody goes along with it. What happened to you is called social bullying or relational bullying. And a lot of people don't realize that. They're like, oh, that's just kids being mean. Well, okay, kids are being mean. Why should I accept that? Why? You wouldn't take it as an adult. Would you like that at work? Then why do you expect this from kids? Why do you want kids to toughen up and just suck it up and live with that? Why? And you really gotta just shift that framework. You got to shift that mindset on how you view bullying. The other thing that really kills me is the culture of snitches get stitches. I mean, if somebody's coming and breaking into your house and threatening you, are you going to be called the snitch for trying to protect yourself? No. Right? People are like, yes, you did the right thing. So why would I be punished or reprimanded or made fun of for reporting the person who is potentially going to hurt themselves and me, or who have already done it? That's one of the distinctions that I want parents to be very clear, as well as the kids. Reporting and snitching or tattling are so different. When you're reporting is because you're trying to keep yourself, including the bully, safe or out of trouble. And when you report something, hey, so-and-so is about to beat up so-and-so, then that bully is going to get in trouble, but they're not going to be hurting themselves or others. And that is just the right thing to do. It's kind of like the golden rule, like, how would you want to be treated? Now, if you're just telling on somebody because you're mad because, they got a cookie and you didn't, that is tattling. That's a snitch. So let's clarify these terms that keep circling in society, because if we start with those super basic fundamentals, we can change the way that society thinks. But we all know you have college education, that society changes takes years, sometimes more than a century. But it's because people are not educated. And now, thank goodness for, video streaming like YouTube, podcast, all kinds of things. People are listening to different frames of thought. And that's one of the things that I'm so passionate about, because as a kid, I just keep thinking, I had a really rough childhood. And I keep thinking, if I would have known this, if I would have heard it somewhere, if I would have had somebody tell me X, Y, and Z, then I would have chosen this path or that path. Thank goodness that my path turned out to be way better than others. But I think I was a kid that was very aware that I did not want what I was experiencing as an adult, So I was like, no, I'm not going to be like this as an adult. It's a miracle that I ended up in the military, because honestly, being bullied, that really shot my confidence. In Nicaragua, I skipped 2 grades and I thought I was like, ooh, I'm smart. And I was so proud of myself. And I came to the United States, then bumped me down a grade, and I was so insulted. Like, how dare you? Like, I'm doing a math advanced than these people here. Like, so what? I don't know English, but that's the only thing holding me back. And the bullying started just because I was different, just even by Latinos, and that too, like, people, please talk to your kids about diversity. So I created the Diversity and Anti-Bullying Academy, because every single case that I helped with, I help parents with their, how to talk to the school and stuff. Every time I asked, how did it start? Why did they pick on you? Why did they start bullying you? It's always because of a difference. One kid identified as bi. The other kid was too dark. The other kid had a special need, I think it was ADHD. This other kid is too poor. The other kid doesn't have the latest trends. It's just dumb how kids will bully other kids simply because of these misconceptions and these stereotypes that we need to clarify. It's different when, you have like, say, Kevin Hart, and he'll joke about race and stuff, but he's doing it in a way sometimes to teach, right? But if you're not having that conversation with kids and saying, haha, yeah, that was funny what Kevin Hart said or so-and-so said, but in reality, he's just generalizing, not everybody's like that. So those type of conversations are really needed. And we just need more awareness of the differences that everybody has. And just to go back to that golden rule, like parents are not even informed in regards to their legal right to have the school protect their child. I have a whole course on that, because when my baby was 5, my oldest, she was bullied by 3 boys. And get this, she was bullied because the 5-year-old that was bullying her, he asked her out over the summer. And she said, no, thank you, I'm 5. I don't need a boyfriend. And then they started school together. And the 2 brothers, they were older, started telling him, like, man, you gotta go show her, you're the man, because she turned him down. So this idea of masculinity was just crazy. And who knows where they learned it from, right? But that's how it began. It was like, oh, I'm going to show her how tough I am. So he started trying to kick her, hurt her, calling her horrible slurs at the age of 5 with the 7 and the 9-year-old brothers. And when I went to the school to get help, well, first of all, it happened at the bus stop. So the bus driver, she tried to do an investigation, which they're supposed to do. And everybody was scared of the bully, so nobody spoke. So then I went to the school, and the school said, I'm sorry, out of my jurisdiction, it did not happen on school campus. And I was shocked, because as a parent, you think, wait a minute, you hired this bus driver. So to me, that is an extension of your campus. Therefore, it is your territory. And they said no. So then she got bullied at school. And then I was like, okay, now what are you going to say? Okay, what are you going to do? Nothing happened the whole first elementary school year. She had to keep, trying to keep herself safe. I kept going back, and they kept saying, we have to follow policy. We have to follow policy. We have to follow these steps. And I was like, wait a minute, let me see this. And at the time I was in studying and research mode. I was in my master's program. So I began reading the policies, and then I started sharing that information with parents and speaking to attorneys, that sometimes have to sue schools about this, to just get more information and inform the parents, like, hey, we need a solution and we need it quick. Our kids cannot go a full, not even a whole month with having to deal with these kids that are messing with them, and it's like a political game that you have to play with the schools. And a lot of parents are intimidated by that. So I try to break that information down for the parents in a very simple way. And I sometimes have to even hold them by the hand and walk them through, like, okay, now you're going to do this. Now you're going to do that. Do you want to appeal? Oh, you didn't know you could appeal. Yes, you can appeal. It's all formal. Put it in writing. If it's not in writing, they don't legally have to be held accountable.
One thing that you said that is sticking with me is how you would not tolerate this in the workplace. And I think of the workplace, there's so many trainings, right? Workplace harassment, all of these policies and procedures that we have to abide by. But how come we don't have similar standards in the schools for our kids? So
exactly.
that stood out to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the other thing too about that is that if you're a parent and that there is no anti-bullying policy, that there is no bullying prevention program, you can start one, or you can recommend one that you've seen that's working at another school or at a church or wherever. And I wish parents knew about the power of their voice. You can have 20 teachers, 30 teachers asking, say, for like more paper for printing for the kids. And the school will be like, oh, okay, we're doing the best we can. But when you have just like 5 parents say, hey, what are you doing about these teachers? They need paper for the homework for the kids. They start feeling the pressure. But of course, the larger the numbers, the better. So it really does not take a huge group to put pressure on that principal. Remember that these people are being paid with your tax dollars. You have a right to ask information such as, how many bullying incidents did you have at the school? What is the name of the program, your anti-bullying program? How are you making sure it's effective? Who's running it? How do you determine a bullying incident versus something similar? Who is trained to do the investigation? What deems this person, like the appropriate person to handle those situations? What type of consequences do you give to the bully? What type of training do you give your teachers? When I began my Diversity and Anti-Bullying Academy, I did a whole bunch of one-on-one in-person focus groups. And the majority of people I interviewed were parents and some were teachers. I'll never forget the first group I had of teachers. It was like 21 of them. And I asked them, how much bullying awareness and prevention training have you had in order to become a teacher? Every single one of them said 0, none. But they deal with this every single day and it interferes with their teaching time all the time. Some teachers even said, I do more of that management of behaviors than teaching. One teacher I remember said, well, I took a class in the Women and Gender Studies department and they touched on that. But that was it. And so my other question was, how often do you get in-depth bullying awareness and prevention training? And a few said, well, we get some, but not really. Well, I said, well, do you know about the 4 types of bullying? Do you know about the reporting process at your school? And everything's like, no. Oh, I didn't know there was a process. Oh, I didn't know that, So please, moms and dads and kids, know that your teachers are given like the Band-Aid solutions to your problems. They really are not. It's not that they don't want to help you, it's that they don't know how. They have not been given the tools. So as a parent and as a kid, if you're part of the PTA, Parent-Teacher Association, or Parent-Teacher Organization, or any student group or parent group, you have the option to suggest group trainings for the teachers, for the kids, and for your parents. So if you want to hire Dali and bring the Diversity and Anti-Bullying Academy to your parents or to your staff or teachers, you can say, hey, I know this person who does training for teachers and I looked into her pricing. This is what it is. I think we should have some of these workshops. Or you can go to somebody totally different, just somebody that is an expert that knows what they're doing to come in and just help that community, because teachers have too much already on their plate. And their job doesn't end when they go home. Their job actually doesn't even begin when school begins. It begins way earlier. And that's a way that you can help yourself, your children, and the teachers. And they'll be so grateful. You can change an entire school atmosphere with the type of programs that you put in place. You could even you don't even have to call the program like an anti-bullying program. You could call it the kindness campaign or whatever your heart desires. But the message is what's important. Storytelling is super, super strong. It's so effective. And this is something I've gone to principals, especially middle school, because bullying rises at middle school. It's actually the worst at 6th grade. So it's 6, 7, 8. And then high school, it drops a little bit, just a little bit, not by much. So some of the things that the principal has said when I walk in, I'm like, hey, do you have like a positive let's be positive campaign or like a kindness campaign or something, if you don't want to call it bullying, because the word is politicized. Sadly, politicians have taken this word and people just roll their eyes and they're like, oh, these weak kids. I'm like, first of all, no, they're not weak, because remember, you wouldn't take that, so don't call them weak, you know. Second of all, bullying has changed. Now we have technology, so you're being tormented at school, but then it follows you into your safe space, or what used to be your safe space, which is your home, your church, you know, where you do activities. These principals, some of them, or some teachers, really don't believe that bullying is a huge issue, although they deal with it in their campuses. It's just because they have not been educated. They have a different frame of thought. They think, oh, I'm an old school person, you know me. That's not a justification. You need to get with it, you know, get with the times, because the way that we were raised back then, it does not serve our children, you know, because things are different. So in regards to school principals, you know, you have to give them ideas. The more ideas and suggestions, and they actually love this because they already have a lot on their plates. And I'm not saying all school principals are closed-minded like that. I've just happened to meet a lot of them because I always speak to educators, but the majority of them are great, and they're so wanting, so they want parent engagement so badly, because if parents become engaged, their job becomes easier. And have you ever gone to volunteer, you know, at your kids' schools? And do you notice the way that they stand or the way that they carry themselves? If you've ever done that, you'll see that they feel so proud that their parent is there, especially the younger ones. My teenage one, now they're like, please, no, don't mom. Like, don't go to school. But there's this sense of pride, and that too helps them academically. And just knowing that your parent is part of a good social change at your school is enormous. Your involvement, even if it's from home, let's say you have a PTA meeting that's virtual, or maybe you can't make it, but you called in, and, you know, or maybe you called in for the minutes, which, by the way, parents, the minutes are something that you can ask. All you have to do is call the front office and ask for the minutes for the last meeting. You know, knowing that your parent is involved is a sign of how much they love you, because it shows that you're prioritizing them. You taking a course on parenting, you taking a course on how to fill out the FAFSA with your child, taking a course on self-defense because maybe you live in a rough area, you know, you want your child to be safe. All of that are actions of, you know, like, hey, I'm prioritizing you. Hey, I love you. I care.
Oh my goodness, you are you are preaching today. I was going to say, so many years ago, I worked for a school district and I worked in the health office. And it's just so funny because how you were saying the active parents, basically, we would have a list in the health office that would have a list of kids that if those kids came into the health office for any reason, we had to contact the parents. If the other kids did, we did not. We were not obligated to contact the parents to let them know that their kids came into the health office that day. So it's very interesting because right away when those particular kids would come in, we were on that phone contacting them, even if it was just for a small little scrape or whatever. We were communicating with the parents. And in my household, and I don't know if I should say this, but I wear this title very proudly. I'm known as Mama Bear because I advocate for my kids. And it is so true that if you do not make it known where you stand within these school districts, within anything, actually, your kids will sometimes be taken advantage of. And it's because there's so many kids in a classroom and they don't have time. Like you said, they're not taught how to take care of these situations. And a lot of times it will be ignored and it escalates outside of the classroom walls. But if we don't know about these situations, that's where it could get worse. And I remember when I worked at the school district, that's the time period where a lot of these budget cuts were being taken away, like counseling, all of these things that are very well needed for the kids were taken away. And again, that's an outlet for these kids that may be, being bullied, to go in and talk to somebody. So a lot of times we would get kids coming into our health office that clearly just wanted to like avoid going to recess. Or they would say, oh, my stomach hurts. And they just wanted to lay down versus go outside and play with their peers. So thank you for bringing that up, because I do feel like when we're dealing with resource families and kids that have a connection to the foster care system, if these kids don't feel safe or don't feel like they have that connection within the resource home, they're not talking to the resource families. Those resource families often are not advocating for these kids, let alone talking to the teacher about what they did on a daily basis or how school went today. So these kids are suffering in silence, and this is something that needs to change, whether it's resource family, the school, these teachers, even, if they're seeing something and if they're not getting the proper training, they still need to say something and go to higher ups to advocate for these kids that are going through this.
Yeah. And they need to do it in writing. I must stress, just telling someone is not enough, because there's no proof that you actually told somebody. And there have been cases where people are like, I don't remember, or that's not what you said to me. Don't do that to parents too, just because they're too busy and they just want to avoid and they just want to get the parent out of there. How you advocate for your child is so important, and also children, how they advocate for themselves, because when you're high on emotions, you get judged. We all do it. We're like, whoa, this person is off the hinges, or oh man, like I'm gonna cry with them because they're crying, so I always tell people, if you're doing some self-advocacy or advocating for anybody, think about what you're going to say first. And you might want to also have a conversation with your child about what happened. Ask it in different ways, because kids sometimes, due to the trauma, they forget certain things, and maybe they'll be like, oh, wait a minute, no, it wasn't so-and-so, it was the other kid. They're not lying, they're just, all these thoughts and things are not clear at first. And I always tell parents, like, grab your phone, do that voice memo thing and record it, or grab a Zoom and just record it and have this conversation with your kids, just so that you can replay it and then organize your thoughts and explain what happened to the principal in writing, of course. And don't be surprised if your child has changed or has fibbed a little bit. It doesn't mean that they were at fault for anything. It just means that they're scared that you might not believe them, or that they might have done something. Maybe they did curse at the person and that's what started the fight. But that doesn't mean that when you curse at somebody, you should get hit. You don't deserve that. So don't place blame. Instead, say, thank you so much for telling me, because I know that takes so much courage. Kids want to please parents all the time. And please refrain from saying, like, it's time to man up, you got to be tough, you got to go beat their butt or do this. No, because that's not how you would handle things in the workforce. And what we're doing is we're training these little humans to be those great adults that are not going to terrorize other adults at work, because I've had to work with them. And so you tell them, thank you for having the courage to tell me. Number 2, this is not your fault. You don't deserve this. 3, how can I help you? Because kids usually do know the answer, and they just want to run it by you because they trust you and see if you'll co-sign for it, on that. If you co-sign, they'll go through with it, and they might not want you to intervene. They just want you there just in case. And if they do want you to be the one to intervene, because they think, okay, this is it, I don't think I can go any further, I think I gotta hand the baton over to you and hope that this turns out in my favor. So this is not the time to tell them to toughen up. This is time to tell them, hey, it's okay to be scared. It's okay, but you're gonna be okay because I've got your back. Reassurance and having at least one person be there for a victim of bullying is what Usually what most in surveys, when they ask them like, what helped you get over it? They say it was just one person, one good person that supported me, and I was able to overcome this. And they're able to also heal mentally easier, because, bullying has been related to so many other impacts: long-term negative mental health effects, depression, suicide ideation, or bullicide, which is suicide caused by bullying. There's even a correlation of victims of bullying having higher risk of ending up in the juvenile detention centers and in the prison system. So don't think it's just the person bullying. Everybody usually who is involved in a bullying situation or has a risk of having some sort of long-term negative mental health impacts. And our brain, our mental health is the most important part of our body. Because, if we're not there mentally with anything, it is so hard to overcome and to achieve things that we want. There is, and I'm sure both of you know this, but I have to say it in case people, maybe it'll click. But I'll use me as an example. When I was bullied as a kid, I was, to the US. I was super smart. I was very proud, very confident. I was not afraid to speak up. And with the bullying always happening, you start to believe it's you. And the reason you start believe that you're causing it is because you're trying to rationalize, why would this stranger who doesn't know me keep doing this to me? It must be me. And so then you start hating yourself, or you start lowering your own expectations about everything. For example, okay, maybe I'm not that smart, or you allow a friend to mistreat you, or you might choose a boyfriend or girlfriend that is not the best, kindest person. Maybe they abuse you mentally, financially, maybe physically or sexually. And then if you once a confident kid wanting to go to college, but now you've missed so much school because you've been trying to avoid this bully that your grades fell back. That happened to me. And then when I tried to catch up, I thought I was dumb. But things like math, you can't just, quickly catch on because it builds on itself, right? So you start having all these doubts and you start lowering your expectations from yourself and from others around you because you think, well, I'll take what I can get. This is best it's gonna be. And sometimes people try to deal with that with substance abuse. And you know how that goes, downhill. You hit rock bottom. Some people never get up and some people do. So please don't think that bullying is just this kid or this, what is it they call it? A rite of passage. It is not. Being tormented, being hurt physically or otherwise as a child should never be a norm. It shouldn't be expected. So take it seriously. This is your baby. And if you were to witness what happens to them in person, you say, oh, heck no, right? But because we're not seeing it, we're like, maybe they're exaggerating. That's one of the things that some parents or some adults do. They say, are you sure that that's what happened? The moment you say that to that child, you just crush their heart because they think, oh, they don't believe me. Oh, maybe it's in my head. So you're teaching them, I can't trust this person. And you're also teaching them to not trust themselves about what they experienced. The experience is not up to you to validate. The experience is true and powerful to them, no matter how small it seems to you. So refrain from saying, oh, I think they were just kidding. Or are you really sure? Oh, are you being too sensitive again? All of that just invalidates that terrible experience that they're experiencing. And now they're going to feel all alone. And if one of your fears is for your child to go to the wrong person to seek, guidance or love, they're going to go and get it from somebody else. And that's dangerous because, people prey on people who are emotionally vulnerable. And let's not even talk about cyberbullying. That's a whole nother thing. that happens, that predators are looking for kids who are being bullied because they know that there's that vulnerability right there. I'm going to make them feel so special, and I'm going to convince them to do this and that. And there's many forms of bullying. There's also just a straight up cyberbully who's telling kids, send me this type of picture, or do this, or say mean things, or they'll create fake social media accounts and start insulting their friends and posting horrible things that they would never, ever post. And it's really hard today in society to say, hey man, no, that was not me. You know, they're going to say, well, all your pictures are there, your name is there, your information's there. But a predator who knows how to bully a child will do their research, and they will look for information on their social medias to gather address, school name, best friends' names. They will look for like things that they like to do to connect with them or to blackmail them. So we have to be aware. We have to be aware of who our kids are talking to, who is reaching out to them. We have to know how to get into their phones. So many, 1 in 10 parents are able to, they know the code to their phone, their child's device. 1 in 10. That's not good. You know, a lot of them don't use monitoring tools. Monitoring tools are great. They're not going to be completely 100% proof, you know, a safe proof, but it's better than having nothing at all. One thing I tell parents is, and this sounds real extreme, but to me it's not extreme because it has happened to so many families, but would you rather be the overbearing parent or the parent planning a funeral? Okay? Doesn't matter if your kid's gonna kick and scream and how dare you, I want my privacy. My honest to goodness thought on that is, you're a child. If I need to go into your devices and find out why you're suddenly secluded, looking depressed, angry, then I'm gonna go into your device and I'm gonna read everything and listen to everything and watch whatever I need to learn exactly what is going on, because I love you and I wanna protect you. So do not be scared to do that. You are the parent, and your job is to raise a healthy, happy child. And that's it.
Thank you so much, Dali, for this information. I think that in the middle of this conversation, I think we've talked about tips for parents and what to do to advocate in the schools. I think we've talked about kids trying to find a safe space and creating a safe space. I work right now, I'm specializing in childhood trauma, and I am taking a lot of trainings on working with adults and the effects of childhood trauma, because I was a victim of that myself. And what you are talking about right now is so crucial, because I work with adults of all ages who are still navigating things from the major relationship in their life, which was their parents. They didn't believe me when I was sexually abused, and I came and I talked to them and they told me I was lying because it was a family member. Or I was being bullied and I came to somebody and they told me, you know, don't let that, ya no llores, right? In Spanish, no llores, no necesito eso. And you feel like you can't express yourself because it's a sign of weakness, because if you cry or you complain, you're going to get in trouble. And instead of having these parents who say, let me help you, let me support you, what can we do, what resources do I need, where do I need to go, how do I need to figure it out? And I know particularly, and I'm speaking for myself, but a lot of my family members that are Spanish speaking only, they're afraid of going into the school systems to ask questions, because what if there's someone that doesn't speak in Spanish? And this hinders them from going in to speak to people. It hinders them from figuring out what's happening in social media. It's a barrier to working with their children because I don't speak English. I don't know who to go to, how to go to, or what they're going to say. And what you're saying right now, it's almost like there's no excuse or justification for dropping the ball, because it's no one's responsibility. No one's major responsibility but the parents. You are responsible for this child primarily over anybody else. And I think we're coming down into a society where we are trusting everyone else with our children. We're trusting the therapist, we're trusting the school system, we're trusting the whoever they're involved with, we're trusting their mentor, we're trusting. And where is that connection between the child and the parent? The parent is the last one to find out what's happening in the school. The parent is the last one to know what's happening in their gaming. The parent is the last one to know what's happening through their social media. The parent, and we can go down that list. And Lakeisha and I have these conversations all the time, because I tell her, we do get into this mama bear mode with, especially with our kids through the agency. And when things come up, it's like, it's on, right? And yeah, it's on. But someone has to do that. Someone has to be willing to advocate for these kids. Someone has to be willing to bite the bullet. Someone has to be willing to say, I know what you're saying, but that's not right, because this is what the situation is. And this is why this conversation is so beautiful. And this is why we're so grateful to you for bringing this topic up. And I honestly think we're probably going to have to invite you at some point to come back, because there's so much more information that I think you can provide for us. But I do want to see if you can close it out for us today. If there is a child or a youth that is listening to this podcast today and they are victims of bullying, they are experiencing this and they don't know what to do and they don't know how to navigate, they don't know where to start, they know this doesn't feel right, this behavior is not normal, but they're not even sure. What advice would you give to a child or a youth who is experiencing this? And again, we have a lot of youth who were in the foster care system, aged out, and they may experience this in a workplace or somewhere, and they may just feel like this is normal, it's familiar, but we know it's not. What is some advice that you could give them? Where can they start? What can they do to advocate for themselves first? And then if you can close us off by telling us where people can find you, because I think people need to have more access to your information, and we'll take it up after you're done with that.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And thank you for the beautiful things you said. Okay, so many things just crossed my head because there's so much I would want to do. First, I want to just send each and every single one of you a virtual hug, like a nice, warm, big hug, because you deserve it. And I want you to remember that you need to love yourself to the fullest and unapologetically. Be selfish. It's okay. Society says it's not, but no, we need to change that. Love yourself. And if you're being bullied, I know it's scary, but you need to seek help. You need to tell somebody. You need to report, because there's so many different types of bullying out there, and you might be doubting yourself, and I want you to trust your intuition. If that feeling is there and it won't leave, if it's giving you any negative emotions or sensations in your body physically, something's going on. You're not wrong. You're not crazy. You need help. And you might not have the vocabulary to explain what's going on, maybe because you're too young, maybe just because you didn't learn the vocabulary. But trust yourself and report, and talk to somebody don't go to somebody that's going to tell you to go slash tires, go to somebody who's going to say, hey, we need to go and actually report this, and somebody who has the maturity to handle it too, because it can be heavy on others. If you tell somebody what's happening to you, they might feel so passionately protective of you that it can be maybe even frightening to you, because you're like, oh my gosh, are they going to make this a bigger deal than what it is? But let them simmer down and together make a plan. But you need to take the lead for that plan, because it's your plan. They're just assisting you. And there's so much more that I would want to share with you. And I know I don't have the time, but I'm also a resource, and you can DM me. I'm at DaliTalks everywhere on social media, or you can email me, Dali, D-A-L-I, at DaliTalks.com. And believe me, there are people that care about you. There are people that want you to speak up and reach out. And never give up on yourself. Never. If people are not listening, if you saw this bully hurt all these 10, 20, 100 kids and nothing happened, I don't care. You need to go advocate for yourself, because maybe you are going to be the one that does it correctly or more efficiently. And you are the one that's gonna keep yourself safe while also creating a change that will keep others safe. So please dig deep and don't quit on yourself, and be unapologetically loving to yourself.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dali, for those beautiful words for our youth. And I really hope that they pause this and repeat it as many times as they need to hear this. I know that you just co-authored a workbook, and we're going to be adding the link to your Amazon for that. It's a workbook for parents that they can go through this workbook. They can get resources and information on what to do, how to have conversations with their kids. And I've been like binging. I've been looking through some of the information that you've provided, because I have been sharing this as a resource to other people. I actually sent this resource to my sisters who have kids. I don't personally have children myself, but I sent it to my sisters, and I was like, you guys need to buy this book. My nephews are really small. They're barely getting into school, but I'm like, you guys need to know how to have these conversations, how to talk about this with your kids, how to make sure that some of my nephews aren't the bullies, right? Because I don't want them out there hurting someone, and how they can protect themselves if they're a victim of this. I have some very headstrong nephews, and I can pinpoint some of them, and I'm like, there's a potential for this one to be a bully, so make sure you talk about these things. So I just want you to know that I've been sending this out, and I know that it's an honor and it's a privilege to have you here today. But I'm going to give it to Lakeisha so she can give us some final comments before we close today's episode. But we will be inviting you back, because I feel like there's so much more information that we need to dive into. But go ahead, Lakeisha.
Yes, thank you again for, you touched on so many different aspects of bullying. So yes, we will have you again. So thank you.
I look forward to it.
Thank you. But I feel very strongly to say this as well. You touch base on the parents, the kids, all of that, but I'm going to extend it to social workers, all of our staff that are working in this field. If you are listening, please take the time to actually listen to these kids that you're going out to the homes to see. Take the time to spend more time one-on-one with just them. And if resource parents are telling you this is what they say or they exaggerate, please do not put them in that category. Get to know them as a person, because what happens is a lot of times these kids, like you mentioned, there is some truth to what they're saying. There may be lies, but it's because either they're suppressing that trauma, or over time they're doing that to protect the bully. So social workers, please take the time to actually listen and spend time with the kids that are on your caseload. Thank you so much, Dali. We truly appreciate you.
It's been an honor. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dali. Are there any final comments that you have for us before we close out today?
No, just I have a blog. I'm all about giving out free information, so it's at DaliTalks.com. And yeah, thank you, and share the information as much as possible, because it can literally save somebody's life.
Yes. We truly believe that, and we're going to be subscribing to that blog because we want that information as well. But Dali, again, thank you so much. Thank you, everybody who joined us for this amazing and wonderful episode of Ministering Over Fostering. Note that if you have any questions or anything comes up, please reach out to us and we can connect you to Dali, or we can get some more information. But we're going to be linking all of her information so you can find her on all the medias and all the spaces. We cannot wait to meet you for another episode. Thank you. You guys have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.